Ohayou gozaimasu. Welcome to a review, not of a film this time, but of a novel, even though said review of said novel is an adjunct to what will shortly follow, a film review. I thought in wrapping up my own personal Mikio-thon, my Naruse retrospective, I would focus on a film that is among his better known, more celebrated, one that is based on a very famous novel by a very famous Japanese author, namely Kawabata Yasunari, the Nobel Prize winning Japanese author of such lauded, canonized novels as A Thousand Cranes and Snow Country, both of which have been filmed for the screen by notable Japanese directors. I thought rather than dealing separately with the novel inside the one review, I would separate out a review of the novel and a review of the film and address some of the complexities in Naruse and his screenwriter's adaptation of Kawabata's deceptively simple and straightforward tome, and to consider some of their tactics and techniques in bringing said tome to the screen. So let us jump right into considering Kawabata's novel. It is a fairly short novel, very concise, even though narratively in some ways it is quite expansive and ambiguous. And it concerns the very complicated relationships within a single family. The house at the centre of the narrative houses an elderly couple, their son and his wife, who are undergoing extreme marital difficulties, with the son having several women on the side, and increasingly their daughter, who has left her own husband and returns to the family home with her two young children in tow. The novel is very much told from the perspective of and focalized through the consciousness of the patriarchal figure, the elderly man, Shingo, and it is his relationship with his daughter-in-law, Kikuchi, that is the most complex, the most dynamic, and that remains kind of thematically at the heart of the film. He is incredibly fond of her. He's berated by his wife, Yasuko, for having a more committed and loving relationship with Kikuchi than his own daughter, Fusako. And this perhaps feeds into the disaffection between Kikuko and her husband, Shingo's son, Shuichi, and his sort of philandering and ultimately very unpleasant activities with more than one woman outside of his marriage, something that leads to two pregnancies, one abortion, an apparently violent episode, and generally sort of domestic disharmony. This marital disharmony is then echoed or mirrored by Fusako's. She has, as I said, left her husband, who we never encounter, brought their children back to the family home, and he goes on entirely off screen. This is something that's related after the fact, to attempt suicide with a different woman. So this sense of a marriage very definitely breaking up, even though she at one point goes back to him to, we infer, try and sort things out. This sense of a marriage definitely breaking up offsets the sense with Kikuko and Shuichi of a marriage sort of grinding on through routine, through ritual, but without any real feeling or love, where Kikuko feels very close to her father-in-law, wants to remain by his side, certainly under the same roof as him, and even seeks this to the detriment of her own marriage, even though Shuichi's sort of unfeeling actions and attitudes cannot be overlooked or discounted. There is a very interesting sort of subtly shifting sense of narration in this film. As I said, in this novel, I'm sorry, Shingo is to all intents and purposes, the central character, and we are given access to his thoughts and feelings. There are extended moments where seemingly incidental details about where he lives or about who he's seen or what he's dreamed about, there is a running motif of his dreams, in which he very, in a lot of detail, protracted detail, sort of ponders over what these mean, or how he could react to them, or what reactions that he's had in the past have meant, or what might happen differently or might have happened differently. So there is a sense of being inside his mindset as he is pondering over all kinds of different dreamlike symbols, all kinds of feelings that are aroused at different times of day, depending on who he's with. But there is also a sense that there is very markedly a narratorial voice, a third person narrator, who at times seems to stand in judgment of Shingo. There is thus a contrast and a juxtaposition of interior thoughts and ruminations and procrastinations on the part of Shingo that are complemented by or contrasted with, or perhaps indeed challenged or undermined by some very curt narrational sort of pronouncements or judgments that feel, after these detailed subjective moments, almost like a jab, if you like. Typically here, the narrator will sort of bluntly sum up or foreclose depiction on and of Shingo in any particular scene, almost as though there's no point in offering any detailed engagement with this character any further, and thereby almost summarily dismissing him. It's a very interesting tactic, and it leads to this tension between sort of subjective development and exploration and very curt objective judgment. And this tension sort of opens up a kind of liminal space, and I think that's where, not untypically for Kawabata, the real sort of story is to be told here. It's what's bubbling along beneath the surface, as it were. as much as, or if not at times more than, what actually transpires. There is also in The Sound of the Mountain a liminal space between, as it were, life and death. Part of the protracted and detailed sort of interior puzzlings and procrastinations of Shingo relate to the fact that he is constantly feeling that he is losing his faculties, both mentally and physically. There are times when he talks about feeling fatigued. There's a moment towards the end where he completely forgets how to tie his tie for work. And as I said, there are all kinds of moments where he thinks about the dreams that he's had or things that he's said or done. And the narration moves between past and present in quite short snippets as he connects different and in some cases disparate events and characters and tries to work out the morality or the meaning of what's going on around him. And this kind of relates to him in the twilight of his life and his increasing awareness of this. The title of the novel, The Sound of the Mountain, is literalized very early in the novel when he thinks that he hears the sound of the mountain. He lives in a small house right next to the mountain, indeed one that is almost the grounds of the house are almost part of the mountain. This is something that is relayed at one point. And he thinks that he can hear the mountain. And he relates this to a sense of encroaching death. And our awareness of that then feeds into the way that he regards his children, his daughter-in-law, his grandchildren, and at times the sense of life that he sees around him or potentially sees around him. There's a lot to do with children here, both the children that come along with Fusako, his two actual grandchildren, and the fact that there are two pregnancies over the course of the narrative, and one abortion. So the sense of life being curtailed before it's even begun is there in a certain moment at a certain period of the narrative. And this, as I said, colours the reflections that Shingo goes through and the actions that he takes, and the sort of shifting point of view on Shingo's own perspective and the narrator's perspective, and potentially our different perspective as we sort of see between the lines of what's happening or read between the lines, is very intricate and complex and beautifully realized throughout. As I said, this is a very deceptively simple novel. It feels like one that's typically for Kawabata fairly easy to read, but is riven with all kinds of subtle and at times disturbing undercurrents about the nature of the different relationships on view. So definitely give this a read. Drop any comments about Kawabata, about this novel or about others that you may have read. Other adaptations of his works. As I said, many of his works have been adapted for the screen in Japanese cinema. Unsurprisingly, given his status as a kind of national treasure, perhaps the most important Japanese novelist of the 20th century, certainly one of them. Like, subscribe, or don't. Follow me on X at AdamBingham01 and online through my website at culturaljapan.com. And look out for my review of Naruse's film version of The Sound of the Mountain coming very, very soon.